We are back with another episode of Fireside Chat with a Naturopath, brought to you by Health Buddha, a digital media company whose mission is to increase awareness around the benefits of naturopathic medicine across Canada. I am your host, Dr. Christina Avila, naturopath and certified diabetes educator, and my guest today is Dr. Paul Hrkal. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
He is a naturopathic doctor who has a passion to apply innovative and evidence-based nutritional, biological, and supplemental interventions to address underlying metabolic, endocrine, and immunological dysfunctions. Dr. Hrkal has special interests in neurological health, chronic pain, and brain injuries. He's a strong advocate of integrative medical education, frequently writing and lecturing to both healthcare professionals and public audiences. Our topic today is how to build immune resilience. The immune system continues to be a buzzing topic given everything that is going on and the situation that we continue to find ourselves in. And while I think most people appreciate that the immune system is the body's defense mechanism against bacteria, viruses, and different microbes, there might not be such a general understanding when we start to talk about things like immune resilience and immune tolerance. So Dr. Paul, I'd really like to begin there and talk about what is the difference between immune resilience and immune tolerance, and what is the difference between the two?
Sure. Yeah, it's obviously the most appropriate question in these days, where everyone's worried about their immune system, and you know, the first point I'd like to make about, you know, the backdrop of living in this current pandemic time is that people are very focused on, you know, I don't want to get an infection. I don't want to get this virus. And we have to take a step back and understand that the body is exposed to viruses and exposed to bacteria and many different things every moment of every day. And it's about how we are able to be resilient to those particular pathogens. And so that's why I've been talking a lot about this term called immune resilience, because that is, I'm just describing something our body does all the time. Mm-hmm. And you've seen it in your practice, I see it in mine all the time. So it's not a matter of killing a virus, which is the way that we sometimes just kind of almost in a cartoonish type of way think about it in our heads, like I need to kill this virus by this Lysol wipe or something like that. That's, you know, when it comes to our body's exposure, that's not the way it works. Our body experiences the exposure and then creates a response. And there's various levels of defense the body has. So the first thing in understanding immune resilience is you have to understand there's two types of immune systems that our body employs to basically make it resilient. Number one, the first one is called the innate immune system. This is think of this as kind of our like police force, our border police. And they're kind of keeping the natural places that a microbe or like a virus may enter the body, like our nose and our mouth, in our digestive system, our urinary tracts, and they're keeping those areas under surveillance. And so this is happening all the time. And this a lot has to do with our mucous membranes. So think of our digestive system is exposed to the external environment. Every piece of food that you eat has some sort of bacteria or bacterial byproducts on it and in it. And then our immune system has to inactivate those. So that's the innate immune system. And then there is an immune system that's kind of like the more military type of force. It's activated when needed. And that's called the adaptive immune system. And just like it's described, it adapts to whatever the particular pathogen is. And so the innate immune system is kind of the first wave. And one of the ways that it kind of helps build immune resilience is that it exposes a pathogen to this stronger but slower activating adaptive immune system. And then now you can call in the big guns, the immune cells that come in, and they now create a response against this particular, whatever it might be. We'll use the virus because that's what everyone's talking about. So that's the two kind of like just understanding basic physiology. That's the first most important thing to understanding immune resilience.
These microbes are literally around us all the time. And if you were to ask most people, they know that there's good bacteria and bad bacteria. And especially when it comes to the gut, we always talk about where our immune system, really lies, which is in the good old gut. And we're often talking about the gut-brain connection. But given today's situation, I think it's really interesting to start to bring into the conversation the gut-lung connection. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great secondary question to understanding what I just talked about, because so much of the innate immune system is positioned in our gastrointestinal tract. And I want you to think about that in a way that's not just your stomach and your intestines, because that same kind of immune associated tissue, especially the lymphatic tissue, which is kind of the immune highway in the body, reaches up right into our nose, into our mouths, into our throats, and then down the intestines, and then right down the intestinal tract. Mm-hmm. And so these same immune cells, 80% of our immune system is congregated around this big long tract in our body. And the reason is that because that's where things are being exposed to. And so the immune system has to differentiate between what's friendly, what's our own cells, what are things that it shouldn't create a response to, like food, and then what are pathogens. So there's this kind of immune processing, there's this chemical processing that's happening at every moment, especially when we're eating. And so that immune processing is reflective of not just the digestive system, but also other systems within the body, because the immune system then, after it's exposed to what let's say might be experiencing in the gut, goes and travels throughout the body to other places such as the lungs. And so there's now research coming out with your microbiome, the bacteria that's in your intestines and the lining of your intestines plays a key role in regulating that adaptive immune response I talked about. Because if it's now overreacting to things it shouldn't react to in the digestive system, it's been exposed to many courses of antibiotics in the past, your microbiome, that bacteria is now not allowing the immune system to identify the right things. So now you're overreacting against the wrong things, which is allergies, and you're underreacting against the things that might be exposed to in the lungs. And so now you have this really important gut-lung connection that's happening, and in fact, in many cases, not happening, and you're having an impaired adaptive immune response. So the research is just starting to scratch the surface of this, but in naturopathic medicine, we've known about this for a long time. And so whenever I'm looking at immune resilience, I'm treating the gut first and foremost.
It's not about pushing the immune system one way or the other, but really understanding where it is, what's going on, and how can we support it. And so, you've talked about the innate immune system, you've talked about the adaptive, and people are probably wondering, okay, so I've got this within me. Now, how do I strengthen these or even create the immune resilience that he's talking about during a time where, my exposure to a virus, is likely?
Right. I think it's worth mentioning that, the point that you just made is really good, because it's not about, I just want to have a huge antiviral response. And all we want is to have a very resilient immune system. We also have to have a very tolerant immune system. So it's kind of like a teeter-totter. You don't want to be skewed to one side. And there is a biochemical immunological way of describing this, and this is called Th1, Th2. Your naturopathic doctor knows about this in a lot more detail, but I'll just quickly describe it as, Th1 is that immune resilience, you're attacking a virus, and Th2 is kind of that allergic response. And a lot of people are in that kind of hyperallergic state, and that's why they may be predisposed to more infections, because if you have a high predisposition to allergy, you are going to have an inherently low ability to fight off a viral infection. And then vice versa, in other conditions, you might have it the opposite, and you're not creating an adequate response to a pathogen, let's say, and vice versa. So to answer your question, we have to do things that balance these two sides of the immune system. And I'm going to share with you a couple things that have research behind them supporting Th1 and Th2 balance. Number one, my favorite, is probiotics. And we talked about this in the context of gut. There are specific strains of probiotics. I'm thinking of one particular a strain called Bifidobacter, and then there's this little identifier after it. Usually it's some number and letter combinations, but it's BB536 is the one I'm just going to say. But that one particularly has, over 30 human clinical trials on anything from, supporting the immune system and reducing the incidence of influenza, decreasing IBS. And one of those research studies are showing that it helps balance this Th2, Th1 immune system. So that is the first place I'm going to start. The second place is also prebiotics. And these are very close to probiotics, but quite different. So probiotics are the actual bacteria, and we have a whole host of trillions of bacteria in our gut, but prebiotics is the food for that bacteria. So fiber, we get that through soluble fiber, fruits, vegetables, certain grains. Whole grains will have lots of fiber, which will feed our good bacteria. So I'm really grooving on probiotics, and now much more on prebiotics because of the effects that they have on the microbiome and on balancing the system. And then, I'll mention two more. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is really, really important at creating a healthy immune tolerance, but so not an overreactivity, as well as making sure that we have immune resilience. And then mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of my favorite classes of natural health products. And there's lots of research on various different mushroom extracts that's showing an immune balancing effect. And the term that is used in the literature is called immunomodulators. And it's something that's beautiful about the botanical world and the orthomolecular natural world is that when things are high, these substances help bring those levels down, whether it's a hormone or whether we're talking about the immune system. And when things are low, it'll help support them. So I don't love the term immune boosters because that's one-dimensional. I like immune balancers, and that helps you reduce overreactivity, but also making sure we have an adequate response against, let's say, a virus. Remember, the immune system has to be just like any child. It has to be properly brought up and sensitized to say, hey, you know what, this is wrong and this is right. And in the sense of in the example of the immune system, this is your own body cells, and this is what a bacteria looks like. This is what a virus looks like, and so on and so forth. This is what a food protein looks like, for example. So this is called priming, and there's these cells in the immune system that it is in around the GI tract called dendritic cells, and they're basically the cells that say, hey, you know what? I'm sampling all the things that are coming in through the intestinal tract, and I'm now going to help bring up the immature immune cells. And now if you're exposed to, let's say, a ton of sugar in your diet, or if you're exposed to foods that are very inflammatory, now those dendritic cells are going to be seeing proteins that are going to irritate them, that are going to say, hey, you know what? Create a response against this protein that's found in dairy products. And now those immune cells are walking around the body having an abnormal response to proteins that may look like dairy. And those proteins could be somewhere in your thyroid, or those proteins could be in your brain causing headaches. It could be anywhere. So that tolerance is so important. But the thing I'll add in terms of resources is there's also resources when it comes to nutrients, to having proper vitamin levels of vitamin D, let's say, for example, or vitamin C is used by the immune cells in much higher amounts when you're sick. And so that's why you can take way more vitamin C when you're fighting something, because the requirement of your body goes up. And that's something that's totally missed in the conventional healthcare system, because we think, oh, you know what? I have my vitamin C through my diet. Great, maintenance. But what if you're sick? You need much higher levels to create the response that now is required. And that's, I think, totally overlooked in our current model.
You've touched on, the vitamin D, the vitamin C, the mushrooms. I myself definitely love to use a lot of botanical medicine in my practice, as I'm sure you do as well. When we are talking about evidence-based plants, what are your go-tos when you are thinking of the immune system?
Well, I think if I was to poll somebody on the street and ask them, what's your favorite, home remedy or natural health product when it comes to the immune system, after vitamin C and maybe zinc, which I love both of those, they'll probably go to something like echinacea, right? That's the most common one. And I'm not down on echinacea. I think it's something that I do use in my practice, but I actually like a herb called andrographis even more than echinacea. And the reason for that is that, number one, there's a tremendous amount of research supporting the benefits of echinacea with andrographis over and above the amount of research that echinacea has supporting it. I believe the last time I checked, it was something like 33 human clinical trials on andrographis for upper respiratory tract infections. I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah.
And what the results of those trials showed in a number of meta-analysis and systematic review papers is that when used, as soon as a person got sick, that the amount of days that they were sick went down in a significant way. They had less symptoms. And basically the body's ability to fight off the infection was enhanced. And so that, to me, that herb is really, really effective. And so I'll use that in combination with your mushrooms that I mentioned, which are one of my favorites. So andrographis is definitely top of my list. And I'd probably say one of the ones that kind of flies under the radar is holy basil. Holy basil is a herb that is traditionally used in the traditional Ayurvedic, which is the Indian traditional medicine system. And it's been used for so many different benefits. Most of the research is actually on blood balancing, which we know that is a huge issue. You're a diabetes-focused practitioner. But there's also research on having an immune balancing and antiviral effect, as well as a cognitive kind of stress coping effect. So I really like holy basil because it addresses a number of key areas: blood sugar, immune system, and our stress coping system, which happen to be 3 areas which a lot of people need a lot of help in.
You brought up the microbiome, and we know that the research is just scratching the surface there with what or how changes in the microbiome affect our health. With everyone, using these hand sanitizers, wiping things down with Lysol, and I think disinfecting to the max. What are your thoughts with the downstream effects of this behavior?
This is where my focus now is. The last month or so, I've been focused a lot on understanding, the immune system, immune resilience. But I think that, some of you may have heard of something called the hygiene hypothesis, which is basically a thesis of, or hypothesis thinking about the effects of over sterilizing our environments and the effects that has on our immune system. Because remember, what we talked about here is this balance, this synergy between the resistant side of our immune system and our tolerant side of our immune system. Because if we really focus a lot on the resistant side and forget about the tolerance, and we push our body that way, then we are not going to have the ability to be able to regulate the exposure to things like, food, substances, and things in our environment, such as allergies. And being exposed to little bits of bacteria and substances like viruses and parasites, the immune system learns what is healthy and what is not, and it starts creating a healthy response. And so if you live in an extremely sanitized environment, the first downstream negative effect is that our body, especially a developing immune system like children, are not going to be exposed to the same amount of pathogens that is going to develop its healthy, robust immunity.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing. And that has been well researched to show that there's an increased incidence of allergies, atopic conditions like eczema. And that's just basically the immune system overreacting to things that it normally should not. The second thing that you just mentioned in terms of over sanitization to the max is that directly, even in small microscopic amounts, you touch something that was sanitized, you put it in your mouth, you're consuming things more, you're breathing things more that, if you see all those pictures of other countries going around and sanitizing their whole streets. I personally think that's a really bad idea because you're inhaling all these things and it's killing bacteria, it's
Mm-hmm.
killing your own microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And that microbiome, the diversity, plays a key role in producing all these immune supportive substances, vitamins, short chain fatty acids like butyrate, which are incredibly anti-inflammatory. And so we don't even understand half the negative effects that this is going to have downstream.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm personally now more focused on not being directly antiviral with anything. I'm now focused on how do we maintain our microbiome, which ultimately is going to have the most potent protective effect, both from a resilient as well as from a tolerant perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting research coming our way as more data is being collected.
We're still scratching the surface.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to know, but I think we need to understand what we do know. We actually know from what has been done and just understanding systems biology, we know a lot more than the average kind of, I think, that is being talked about in the conventional healthcare system.
Mm-hmm.
For us to develop proper herd immunity is about keeping a balanced and healthy immune system. We are never going to be able to sanitize our way out of this problem. That's always a short-term solution. So what are the key things that are going to build immune resilience and tolerance? Vitamin D, zinc, vitamin C, healthy sleep patterns and getting adequate melatonin. But all those things are key prerequisites to having a healthy immune response.
Thank you, Dr. Paul, for all of that amazing knowledge. And if you want to learn more from him, follow him on Instagram at Dr. Paul Hrkal. He is also an affiliate of AOR Health, and they've recently put out a podcast called Supplementing Health. You can check that out on Spotify and Apple. If you liked our video, please make sure you click that like button and subscribe to our Health Buddha channel so you can get updates as to when our next fireside chat will be released. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.